Here in America, 300 years ago, the oceans washed the edges of a continent almost untouched by man. Between her two oceans, the land held everything man could need. Wildlife to last until the end of time. Across the continent the white men rolled, first on wheels of wood, then on wheels of steel. Hacking, ripping, and gouging as they went, building a great and mighty nation. But now there is no new land. Only at the 11th hour did we take steps to save some fragments of those beautiful, breathtaking America. State and federal refuges were established. The national forests, the national parks. Within them, outstandingly beautiful and unusual areas of primeval America are preserved for all the people for all time.
Parks, forests, wildlife refuges, conservation areas, monuments, wildernesses, and recreation areas. These are all part of America's public lands. They protect and provide for our natural and cultural heritage, but safeguarding them requires a deliberate and ongoing effort. It's an effort that often produces conflict, as individuals and groups hold differing views about the value and use of public land. This is the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. It crosses Alaska, a state more than twice the size of Texas, from top to bottom. The pipeline was built across vast stretches of public land, along with areas belonging to several native Alaskan tribes. It can move 2 million barrels of crude oil per day, from Prudhoe Bay in the Arctic down to Valdez on the Pacific. The oil industry has done well in Alaska, and the people who live here receive considerable tax revenue from the oil, some of which is paid out in a yearly check to everyone in the state. Now, with climate change underway, there are calls to drill more, here, in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, a place sacred to Native peoples and home to one of the most unique and fastest changing ecosystems on Earth.
We live simple lives, but we're rich in our culture. We're not asking for anything. We're not asking for schools. We're not asking for money. We're not asking for jobs. We're demanding that you leave our caribou alone, their calving grounds. And all our prophecies tell us that what befalls the caribou befalls the Gwich'in.
There are no roads that lead to Arctic Village. The village is deep within the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, so these occasional flights are the best way to get there. They're also the best way to take in the scale of the landscape.
Well, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in its current state is roughly the size of South Carolina. It's one place on the Earth where we can see what would happen if humans weren't interfering. We have over 200 species of birds that are found in the refuge. We have all three species of North American bears, including the polar bear, black bear, and grizzly bear. Basically, we have what we consider to be the complete complement of wildlife that were ever found in this area.
Alaska came into the Union formally in 1959 as a state because of its amazing land and unique topography. Alaska had the opportunity to have public lands on a pretty big scale. In 1959, we had President Eisenhower, a Republican president, by the way, set aside an Arctic National Wildlife Range.
We stand together at a pivotal point in history.
What they're doing, what our elected leadership is doing, is trying to do short-term, which in people we're thinking about 7 generations ahead. All we're going to be left with is contaminated water, dirty land. They're going to destroy everything and leave us with nothing. If there is still a chance to stop this from happening, then we fight to the end.
We have this kind of whimsical idea that if they're public lands, we sure don't want to find an oil rig out there.
What we're talking about here is closing in perpetuity an area that has the most promising prospects for crude oil.
For too many and too long, this has been an issue of environment versus energy. No one wanted to hear about the Gwich'in. In my village, 75% of protein comes from caribou.
But the reality is this area should be drilled. I've been fighting this battle for 39 years.
If you drill for oil there, you are drilling right into the heart of our existence.
It's hard to live in 2 worlds that you're trying to adjust in. I mean, we adapt, but there's just too much going on. There's too much trauma right now. Like, I'm trying to find and live my culture, which I know is probably never going to be 100%, but I'm still trying to live like where I have to live in this society, where I have to have a job and pay bills and be away from my kids. And so it's hard.
The Gwich'in have occupied the land around Arctic Village for 1,500 years. Despite the use of various modern amenities, the Gwich'in here still maintain a traditional lifestyle of subsistence off the land.
Growing up here in Arctic Village, our elders, they've always stressed to us how important the land is. I remember in one of the meetings, we were just little kids, but I remember one of our elders standing up and saying that the land is everything. It means more to us than money. That all of our values as Gwich'in people are about this relationship we have with the land. We still fish, we still hunt, we still gather. Knowledge is passed from one generation to another. So when we talk about the caribou, it's not just our food. It's our culture, our spirituality. It's part of the social fabric.
We have to live in the 2 worlds. We have to learn about the Western world, and we have to respect our ways. It's very difficult because we tell our children, go get your education, get higher education, go to college so you can survive in this world. And at the same time, we tell them, go out in the land, learn how to survive in that world.
I lost my identity after high school sometime. I just kind of didn't follow the path that we usually do, and continuing going out on the land. I started drinking and partying more than I needed to, and just when I started getting myself back together, early 2006, my brother committed suicide, which made me just lose myself all over again. I feel like I was just lost for a very long time. But in 2014, I went back up to Arctic Village, and when I went up on Deschanel, I don't know what was over me, but I was just overwhelmed. My chest felt like a ton of bricks was on it, and I just looked out over the mountain, and I just understood why my ancestors returned every year. And I asked Creator for forgiveness for being disconnected so long. And that I'm here now to share in my responsibility as a Gwich'in. And ever since that time, I really take this job and this position, my life, my children, my direction, way more serious. Every time I think that I need to take a break, I just always think of my kids. I want my daughter to be a strong woman. I want her to be confident in being a Gwich'in woman, an Indigenous woman in this world. I'm really trying. I just feel like I'm failing.
Fuck, I thought we'll see some at least. What's that over there? Come on, keep moving, come on. Keep moving, come on. Come on. See, those are cow and calf. We don't shoot those.
The general theory about why caribou migrate to the Arctic coast for calving is that the calving area up there provides access to very nutritious vegetation. The other advantage to going up there is that there are fewer predators. You know, the combined benefit of those two factors is what's thought to drive the caribou migrations.
This coastal plain is part of a small region outside the protection of the wildlife refuge. This 1002 area had been set aside in 1980 for the purpose of oil exploration.
The vision of Congress was to establish both a wilderness and a refuge. The wilderness is approximately 8 million acres. The refuge is 9.5 million acres, leaving this 1002 area, the coastal plain area. Congress, in its wisdom, left this area open with the belief that the national energy security of the country might necessitate its development.
There are estimates of oil reserves in the 1002 area ranging from 7 to 11 billion barrels. The government's environmental impact report showed that the area was of fundamental importance to the porcupine caribou, and that oil and gas development activity could drive the caribou away, changing their migration routes and reducing their population. But in 1989, Congress was very close to approving drilling in the 1002. But then, this happened. The Exxon Valdez spill off the southern coast of Alaska brought the cost of oil extraction to the front of people's minds, and Congress abandoned it. Despite this, the attempts to allow drilling along the coastal plain continued, most recently under the Trump administration.
I represent Alaska. This little dot is what we're talking about, the 1002 area.
This is not a choice between energy and the environment. We're past that.
Please, let us develop our resources responsibly so we can fund our state.
It's not about the environment or the caribou, it's about economics.
What they're doing, what our elected leadership is doing, is trying to do short-term. I think about my children, my grandchildren, the land and the animals, clean water, it'll be here forever if we take care of it.
We've been fighting these oil companies for 40 years, trying to protect this area. Unbelievable that we actually have to explain why that area should be protected. What is sacred? What do Americans hold sacred?
First thing you have to understand, most of us that live in Alaska, we're conservationists. Now, I happen to work in the oil industry.
Prudhoe Bay oil field is the largest oil field in North America. Oil production began in 1977, providing the vast quantities of oil which flow south through the pipeline. The remaining oil is declining, and extending the pipeline to reach into the 1002 area could provide decades more oil to keep the pipeline flowing.
It's easy to just say no to development, but where are we going to get our energy? People want to put gasoline in their cars. Well, the oil's got to come from somewhere. If I was living in, Massachusetts, I'd say, well, that's a pristine area. You're going to ruin that landscape. And I can understand that perspective. They don't care where their gasoline came from. But for the folks, in Alaska, you've got 700,000 folks here, and a lot of them are dependent on the oil industry.
On the one hand, the oil and gas industry is the main source of revenue for Alaska. So Alaska does have a stake in keeping the oil flowing. But there is an awareness that climate is changing, and the change over the last half century has been more rapid here than in other parts of the world.
We have to allow the earth to heal herself and slow down. We have a prophecy about it. It's called the voice from the north. And the prophecy says the voice from the north is going to rise to warn all humanity it's time to change. And we've risen. That voice has risen. That warning has come.
This government has taken enough from us. They've taken enough from all the indigenous people.
Congress believes that they can open up the Arctic refuge and that they can do this without the American people knowing. First American people are showing up to say that will not happen.
If there is still a chance to stop this from happening, then we fight to the end. We don't give up, we don't compromise, and we don't try to negotiate to see what we can get out of development. I really do have faith that we're going to unite and we're going to stop the development in the Arctic refuge. This is huge to us because this is our way of life. And then when somebody just doesn't even bat an eye. Hey Rob, my name is Bernadette Dementiff. I'm from the Gwich'in Steering Committee in Fairbanks, Alaska. We just wanted to let you know that we oppose development in the Arctic refuge and that we hope that we can depend on you to protect the Arctic National. Thank you. No emotion, and they're going to make a decision on your future. It's frustrating. If they're going to destroy our way of life, they might as well look us in the face while they're doing it.
We are here to mark up legislation to allow responsible energy development in a small portion of the non-wilderness 1002 area in northeast Alaska.
Ms. Murkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Barrasso.
Aye.
Mr. Risch. Aye. Mr. Lee. Mr. Flake. Mr. Daines. Mr. Gardner. Mr. Alexander.
On December 20th, 2017, Congress approved a provision allowing oil and gas drilling in the 1002 coastal plain area of the Arctic refuge. President Trump signed it into law 2 days later.
I'm shocked. I really am that this is what our country has come to. I'm so fucking worried about my kids. I'm worried about their future, and I'm worried about my people.
After decades of opposition, drilling in the 1002 area would be allowed.
I mean, our economy is based on, petroleum. If there are oil fields in that area and we're not willing to produce those, basically you're saying, Alaska, you're done in 30 or 40 years, and then you fend for yourself.
That's just something that we have to stand up against. We'll take our last breath protecting the coastal plain.
Huge swaths of forest land were clear-cut. Much of it was old-growth forest, ancient and undisturbed.
What's Oregon? Trees. I love it because it kind of reminds me like where I live in Mexico. Trees, oak trees, water, creeks, rivers, and I just fall in love. I went and asked the people at the timber mill for a job, and I worked 20-some years and never missed a day and never late.
Well, we live in Douglas County, and it used to be the timber capital of the world. We moved to Glide area when I was about 9-ish, and just logging was booming when I was a kid. My dad came here because he got a bullbuck job. When he was a boy, he horse logged with his dad and then moved up to, just falling timber. My grandpas were both loggers on both sides of my family. My uncles, all of them were loggers. It was my heritage.
These lands are home to diverse plants and animals, including the northern spotted owl, which, in 1990, was listed as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act.
Yeah, that's a call I wasn't hoping to hear today. That usually means they're hauling logs out of the valley. They're telling everybody to get out of the way.
Conservationists took legal action, and in 1991, logging in forests that contained the owl was stopped by court order. And timber harvests shrank by 80%.
There's two sides to every story, and that definitely holds true to, our forests here in the Northwest. Got my gun, I got my donut.
From my perspective, environmentalist means somebody who is willing to take you to court to get you to change what you're doing. And conservationist, to me, means, somebody that hunts or fishes or just enjoys nature and understand, the root word of conserving that resource.
There's plenty wood out there, plenty timber. They stopped logging because some crazy bird, spotted owl, they said they need to have the old growth timber, and that was not the truth. The truth was that they just want to stop the logging. They had to use some kind of bird to stop it.
It don't make sense.
The Endangered Species Act was passed in 1973, the Wilderness Act in 1964, 1968 was the National Environmental Policy Act. So we've had these laws on the books for a long time, but it wasn't until the early to mid-90s that we stemmed the tide of old-growth clear-cutting. They resisted change for a long time, and it made that change more drastic when it came.
30 years ago, we were harvesting over 8 billion board feet of timber in the state of Oregon every year. About half of that came from our federal forest lands, about 4 billion feet. Common denominator in these rural communities in Oregon is that most of them are surrounded by federal forest lands. The economy's dependent on products that came off the federal forest. The mills sprung up because the federal forest lands were there, and for decades it sustained those communities.
We hammered the land in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Lots of clear cuts, lots of old growth logging, and so the ecosystem's pretty out of whack. The spotted owl was in trouble for a long time. We knew it in the early 80s. We tried to ignore it. When it was listed in the early 90s, it created the impetus for change.
President Clinton was elected. He held a forest conference in Portland, Oregon in April of 1993. From that conference, a new management plan was developed for the national forest.
On a balanced policy to preserve jobs and to protect our environment.
And that was the sea change that basically shut down the timber sale program on the national forest where the spotted owl was an issue. That's what began the demise of those mills and those communities that depended on federal forest lands.
Public lands, they have a higher mandate to serve multiple uses, and we're realizing every day that cutting down trees might not be the most valuable use.
There's no denying that when there's no timber to harvest, there's no mill jobs, there's no support for these rural communities. And so when the federal forest supply dried up, those communities did as well. A lot of folks in Portland like to talk about us in the past tense like we're some colorful part of the state's history. But we're still the second or third biggest industry in the state behind high tech. Oregon makes more softwood lumber, that's the kind of lumber that we build homes out of, than any other state in our nation. We ought to be supporting that kind of industry, not developing policies and laws and regulations to further erode it.
People are happy because they had jobs and we had a future. But when the mill shut down, we went 2 years without logging or nothing. Do absolutely not a thing.
Glide lumber closing, was just that much less timber revenue for our community and our county.
It was tough. I mean, I feel like I lost the world when I lost my job. But, like I say, you just don't give up. You keep going.
There's less and less logging every year. If we was to just not be able to log, we wouldn't be able to help the kids we're helping. After he got a job at the local lumber mill, we went to the state and told him we wanted to adopt.
The Rivera family is large. Sarita and Manuel have fostered nearly 50 kids over the past few decades.
Well, a lot of these kids come up in really hard families. Drugs, alcoholic, abuse, and all that stuff.
When these kids come, I mean, they're, damaged. They have reactive attachment disorders. I mean, anger.
All we're doing is teaching them how to make in the world. When the kids get out of this house, he knows how to work. He knows how to make a living. And he's not going to depend on a welfare. He's going to be making a good living, and he's going to survive out there in life.
Our kids leave with a bank account. They leave with some work skills. Hopefully they leave knowing that we're there for them forever, for life.
We do it because we love to doing it, because we've seen the change in the kids.
It's a good feeling to have these two generous people take, random crap heads like us and change our life for the better and teach us that life is harder than you think it is. Stuff's not going to get handed to you. You have to work for it.
Explain to what the cat's doing in there.
So what the cat is really doing is, so he had to go down in the canyon and get a log and then buck it up there, up the hill, to put it on the deck.
So what was the reason you put the cat in there? To get more lift on a line, or?
Yeah.
So you explain to that?
Yeah.
None of our foster kids is interested in logging or going into logging. It's hard for the interest to be there when it's talk so negative around the house. They see us not working for months at a time. They can see that there's not a future unless, we start seeing some changes.
More work opportunities for the Riveras requires more timber allowed for harvest. This is the Elliott State Forest. It overlaps the county the Riveras live in, and it is for sale.
When we started to not harvest as much timber off the forest in order to protect those areas, it became a drain on the Common School Fund. That's why the State Land Board looked at divesting that asset in some way, shape, or form.
They do have a fiduciary responsibility to the Common School Fund, but nothing in the law says that they needed to make a precipitous decision about what to do. They have a treasure there. Amazing forests, spotted owls, marble mullet, coho salmon, some of the best fish-bearing streams in the Coast Range.
Yeah, they've got an active logging operation going on up here. They make it perfectly and abundantly clear that it is closed to all public use. They don't want anybody on that ground.
It breaks my heart that we got to this point where, parcels on the Elliott State Forest were sold. It was a huge wake-up call to Oregonians, and especially those of us that hunt and live and play and work on the Elliott, that, when a gate like this come up, we realized then that, this was serious. This is legitimately a threat to, the public having access to this forest. It's our resources that were obtained to build these roads. Well, then they sell this ground. These private timber companies own all these BLM roads, basically, and they're able to put gates on them because there are easements when those sales and those land transfers occurred that gave the authority to the timber companies to, dictate who gets to travel across them. They'll put a gate up and there's virtually no public access at all. In August, because of fire danger, there is no place to go hunt other than this ground right here. The Elliott State Forest is the only ground that's open. Every other, piece of ground for 100 square miles is locked up with gates and no trespassing signs.
Does Oregon want to be the poster child for privatization of public land? Because that's what they're flirting with right now. I think it would be an amazing thing if the green state of Oregon becomes the first state in the United States to really have a major conversion of public lands to private ownership.
They had 3 appraisers come in and appraise the forest. It's $220.8 million, which unfortunately is low. It was really interesting to me, to be honest with you, that there was only one bidder.
The only offer to buy the forest came from a consortium of Native American corporations, along with Lone Rock Resources, a large timber company.
You like this tree? We'll take it later. See how the branches are dying? It's pretty much done. These 2 trees are dead. Marcus can explain to you why we're cutting these trees.
Well, you know.
They probably don't know.
You explain that stuff better than I can, Dad.
Well, I'll show you here.
A lot more.
See the mushrooms are going on the side of the tree, right there? Time is to catch the disease, catch on the trees. Timber will grow. Timber will die just like people, you know. Eventually we all get old, we get diseases, we die, just like the trees do. They get diseases and die, and it's just part of the way of living, you know. New life comes along.
No, I just really enjoy being out in the woods, cutting timber, and be out here and what God's created here. And you gotta love it to be out here anyways. It's not the easiest job, and it's pretty hard. Definitely a dying trait.
Well, I think just that private landowners that keep the mills going, because there was no timber sales and Forest Service and BLM, not even the state. They want to grow timber because that's how they make a living. In 1980, probably we destroyed the forest out there, we overcut. I understand that. But now we're the other way. We don't want to cut nothing. Something needs to be done. We need to change the system.
Move on now to the next action item, item number 5, status report on the Elliott State Forest ownership transfer opportunity. We have initiated negotiations with the proposers of the single proposal submitted, and the department has been providing information and materials as appropriate.
Our position is simply this: the Elliott State Forest is an asset within the Common School Fund. And in order to ensure you fulfill your fiduciary duty, you have to make sure that the assets within the Common School Fund do not drain the corpus.
How am I feeling? Great, ready to start life, so I'm ready for whatever comes at me. I got a lot of plans, I'm hoping to make them happen.
So we're going to go ahead and take public testimony, and I'm going to ask folks to come up, and you're going to have a minute each.
As a student, I hope that you decide to find a different way of funding these schools than using our greatest teacher of all, nature.
The Elliott currently right now is the home for 8,000 elk, and it provides the best hunting around.
The people of Oregon have spoken out overwhelmingly against sale of our public lands, and especially of the Elliott. It's not just about keeping it in public ownership, it's also about protecting the forests, the water, the marble murrelets, the spotted owls, and making sure that we really do truly have a management plan that will permanently protect those assets and maintain them for future generations.
Our state's natural heritage and conservation legacy are at stake,
as is the future of our children's education. OLCV firmly agrees with Governor Brown and Treasurer Reed that having both is very possible. Thank you for your leadership, and know that the conservation community remains committed to working with you to finalize a permanent solution to fund our kids' schools and to permanently protect the Elliott, a spectacular and irreplaceable coastal rainforest.
Jordan Gage Kress. Joshua William Kress.
What I'd like to do is bring closure to this conversation about the Elliott. I believe that retaining the Elliott in public ownership will best serve the interests of Oregonians over the long term.
Secretary Richardson?
Aye.
Governor Brown?
Aye.
Treasurer Reed?
Aye.
Carries.
After months of public pressure, Oregon's State Land Board voted to keep the Elliott State Forest in public ownership.
I'm sure they would have sectioned it off and had little timber sales every year off of the Elliott, and it would have benefited the whole industry, the whole community, really, because it would have brought money back to here. I think as far as logging goes, I mean, with our kids and foster kids, we've accepted the fact that they may not want to follow our footsteps. Times are changing. There's hardly nobody going into logging.
You know, logging can be up and down, but it's just back-breaking work. That's not something I want to do for the rest of my life.
There's millions and millions of acres of timber. So much timber.
There's a conflict, and there will continue to be a conflict between the people who think that land should always be used and the people who think that land should always be left alone. I think there's some room in the middle.
I'm a rancher in southeastern Utah, running a cow-calf operation on 98% public land. Permitted for about 1,000 head. We're running about 850 now, 800. I've made money some years and I've lost money some years, and there isn't no better place to raise a family, I don't think.
This county is about 97% public lands, or government lands, more properly. To be in the livestock business or the ranching business in any scale, you have to graze on the government lands.
Somehow, particularly in southern Utah, grazing isn't a multiple use, it's the dominant use.
Ranching on the BLM, doing what we want, essentially is part of our custom and culture.
A lot of grazers, certainly not all of them, are Mormon. In the Mormon church, there's a sense of you're a good person if you're making the land productive.
My great-grandfather came with that first party of Mormon pioneers.
They ran a few Indians out and they had free range.
And I don't think my father really realized if you keep taking more and more out of the rangelands, then they deteriorate.
I got 4 girls. And my oldest has a real interest. That in some ways, a lot of ways, made my job matter more.
Well, I've been in a horse since I was 2 or 3, since I was little. There's a lot of people who don't know what it feels like to not see a track of anyone, have any sign of humans for miles and miles and miles. So you could ride forever and ever and ever and not see one person. And that 390,000 acres, that's plenty enough for me.
The Red family mostly ranch on public land here in San Juan County.
Okay, this coffee Warren's probably gonna be pretty dark. I let it boil last night pretty hard. It boiled this morning pretty hard. And I filled it pretty full because I knew we'd just add water and make some more. But it's too hot for Justice. She likes almost iced coffee. Ooh, that's black. That is tar, baby.
Much of the land they graze is managed by the federal government. To ensure access, they must apply for permission from various government agencies.
Yeah, Justice showing a real interest, I guess, it made me more conscious of my choices and my relationships with the agencies. She deserves to have a respectful relationship with them, and I've got to do some things that maintains that. But ultimately, I guess I want to have healthy range. I want someone that doesn't know a lick about anything to drive through my winter country or my summer country and say, well, the people that graze this, they're doing all right. I can't live in God's country or damn close to it and not expect other people to want to come see it.
When I was a kid growing up, the only use on these lands, desert and mountain, was ranchers. Now the environmentalists and recreationists are the most powerful politically.
50 years ago, the only people out here were local people, lived in Blanding, Monticello, Bluff. And when you have a place like this as a private backyard, man, that hurts to have to share that with somebody. And when the internet came about and people started seeing pictures of these beautiful places and tourists started showing up, then folks had to start sharing it with people. And it started to get treated like really public land owned by all Americans. The visitation to Bears Ears has easily tripled or quadrupled in the last decade.
I do believe in the BLM's tagline, land of many uses. And I've thought about that tagline for a long time. There are places that their best and highest use is probably for oil and gas development. But then there are other landscapes that I think we recognize their best and highest use is to leave them as they are. And we know from proof now that people come from all over the world to behold these special places. The businesses that are in the rural parts of southern Utah are dependent on the people who come visit, and they drive the economies moving forward.
Well, to be simple, before the discovery, 1492, this whole United States was Indian country, dating back to thousands of years. Before the federal government instructed Kit Carson to round up the Navajos back in 1863, we were marched from here all the way to Fort Sumner. We were destined to be put into Indian territory in Oklahoma. But that didn't work because a lot of our medicine people finally came to a conclusion that the treaty needs to be signed, and they returned.
The public lands around Bears Ears have long suffered vandalism and theft of Native American artifacts. culminating in an FBI bust of an artifact smuggling ring in 2016.
This one came just 2 miles south of here on Murphy Point, and I know it was out of a burial, and I know for sure that the Indian who wore that walked on my hill.
There's still mummies in there?
They were, yeah.
Bears Ears was about tribes, and it was about co-management of lands that were effectively taken from them.
In 2015, the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition was formed. They drafted a proposal to President Obama for the designation of a Bears Ears National Monument to protect their ancestral homelands and grant them authority to help manage it. At the end of that year, President Obama designated over 1.3 million acres as Bears Ears National Monument, and privy to the protections that implied.
Utahns love our public lands. They're part of who we are, and they're part of our Western heritage. The issue that we have is that over time, presidents are coming in under the Antiquities Act and creating more and more monuments of greater and greater size. However, oftentimes, it's not best for those who actually live adjacent to those areas and are so dependent on the land for their livelihoods.
Right now, it's about a calf in those cows for next year, and then a blonde girl and a couple other curly-headed ones over there. What a perfect ranching scenario would be for every one of them to reap the benefits of this lifestyle. For a guy like me, there's nothing better than doing this. We still have a resource here that I feel obligated to maintain, to increase for my kids and their kids.
The people who are here, who do run on this land and who make a living out of it, care more about it.
There's an old expression, the best manure for a piece of land is the footprint of the owner.
That means the guy that's here every day, year in, year out, he's a better steward than someone who might be well-educated but lives somewhere else. In this country, for a man to stroke his pen and to designate 1 million acres right here in my backyard, I mean, it's anywhere it's un-American. It's a land grab is the way I see it ultimately. It's what I see the monuments. I know that putting another layer of management is not going to create better land.
A national monument should be an honor to a county, not a big imposition. And this monument felt very much like a heavy-handed action that was done more to us than for us, and certainly not by us. History of public lands and private property in San Juan County, and I really like the overlays that he's got. This is the monument as it was declared. This is what it is on the ground today, so looks like a bloody mess when you're done.
Most everybody agrees that it deserves some kind of protection, but most people also don't recognize that the scope of it is a concern, how large it is. 1.5 million acres is pretty large. It's larger than our biggest national park. And our largest park's 337,000 acres. This is 1 million acres larger. So the scope of it is a concern for many people. And then the vehicle of protection. Should it be a monument or should it be done legislatively?
Utah Governor Gary Herbert signed a resolution asking President Trump to rescind the national monument status. And in April of 2017, the president directed Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke to review Bears Ears. Just months after becoming a national monument, Bears Ears was up for reconsideration.
I got on a horse and we saw a stream of people coming with him. And he looked at me. But we talked for probably 2-3 minutes. I mentioned some stuff that I had on my mind, and he said, well, we'll talk about those things. Been thinking, hopefully, that the pleading of the public will turn his position and make a stay. That would be my hope, my ultimate hope.
Zinke's report suggested reducing Bears Ears and other monuments.
You know, it's really a thrill to have the President of the United States here in Utah.
Protect Bears Ears! Protect Bears Ears! Protect Bears Ears!
And it's unfortunate that we have to go to war on something as mutually and universally loved as public lands.
What are we doing? Indigenous lands are under attack! Stand up! Fight!
No one loves public land more than I. You can love it as much, but you can't love it anymore. I've become an expert in monuments, and the president made a promise. He said he would listen. There's not many presidents that would do what he is about to do.
This state has many natural treasures, but its greatest treasure by far is its people. And we will ensure the right of the people to live according to the faith in their hearts. The families and communities of Utah know and love this land the best, and you know the best how to take care of your land.
Many of the iconic formations and Native American sites remained protected. Some did not.
The president can tear a monument apart that a former president did. Then can the next president put it back together? And the next president take it apart? What precedent does that set? But there was going to be a tribal commission, and they would make recommendations about protection of archaeological sites, protection of springs, protection of whatever, and that's been destroyed now. So it isn't just about mining or not, or grazing. It was also about honoring people who lived there far longer than the current white people.
I view public lands as for the public. They should come here regardless if it has that title on it. I mean, the land's still there. You can still go to the part where it's not a monument and it's still the same thing. We need to fully embrace the definition of multiple use.
America's public lands are a trust held by the government for the benefit of its citizens and the conservation of its resources. It constitutes approximately 614 million acres, or 25% of American soil, and its myriad uses have been mired in controversy. Recreation, preservation, conservation, extraction. How should these lands be used? How are they best protected and sustained for the benefit of future generations, both for those who make a living off the land and those who simply desire to explore it? This is a question which has been asked for over 150 years, a question which will continue to be asked, and it is up to the people of America to answer it.
When you see a beautiful landscape, where does it go? Through your eyes, through your mind. Something is ailing you, it will cure it. You will smile. You will laugh. You will be happy. There's an attachment to it. So, do we continue to fight or do we heal each other? That's the question.